Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Rank where I climb the Online Series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today we're trying out a really strong Weakness Policy DIALGA team, which is not exactly the most common set on DIALGA. This was built and piloted by a player called Terence, who was actually able to finish third at the Thailand National Championships just a couple of weekends ago, and subsequently got an invite to Day 1 of Worlds as a result. So first of all, huge congratulations to him. I'll link the results of that tournament if you want to check it out in the description below on Victory Road. And as always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps linked in the description below. And thank you so much as always for watching. If you do enjoy, please show your support by leaving a like, and I'd really appreciate it. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the restricted core here. It's Dialga and Kyogre, which is not exactly super common in this format. Dialga saw some decent usage back in 2016, and it's really interesting because it's an absolutely phenomenal Pokemon as a Dynamax option, but one of the main issues that players often have with Dialga is that it falls off after Dynamax pretty significantly, especially because a lot of the Dialga sets are like 4 attacks, right, with Life Orb. This is actually just Roar of Time and Flash Cannon with Trick Room and Protect, and you have Weakness Policy on it. One thing that's really cool about this team is that it has multiple ways to activate Weakness Policy. So one way is Incineroar using Brick Break on Dialga. Once you've set up Trick Room, Incineroar will actually move first, so you can just activate the policy immediately and go from there. You could also just lead Tornadus Dialga, self Brick Break to activate policy, and either just attack immediately, or go for like a Tailwind with Tornadus, Protect on Dialga turn 1, survive with the Focus Sash on Tornadus, and then turn 2 go for Brick Break, and then go for max moves from there. So I think that's really, really neat. This team has a lot of different means of speed control, so you have Latias with Tailwind and Ally Switch and Mystical Fire with Eject Button. So this is kind of a unique set. It's pretty situational, I think, relative to the rest of the team. The most consistent way I found so far is really just going with Tornadus. Even like Tornadus Dialga is a really effective lead with this team. That pressures with the Tailwind route. With Incineroar in the back, actually, if your opponent is like fast, what you can do is, bait the Tailwind, but actually switch Tornadus out into Incineroar, and then, Trick Room with the Dialga, and then just go with Incin and Dialga from there, with Kyogre as obviously your other option. But there are plenty of other ways you could play it. I think Dialga as, early game Pokemon is really strong with this team, because it not only pressures Trick Room, but also pressures the Dynamax, but you've also got the Assault Vest Kyogre here. Kyogre is a really nice partner for the Dialga, because Dialga is obviously quite weak to ground-type attacks, and so Groudon, Landorus T are both really good into it, as well as other ground-type Pokemon, and Kyogre can be super solid into those Pokemon that otherwise would give your Dialga trouble. You've also got Life Orb, Thundurus Therian form. One of the reasons why Thundurus Therian form has picked up a little bit in usage, it's still really not common at all, but the reason that you'd want to use it is because it's got a really solid base speed that allows it to just outspeed like the base 100s, and, the base 95 speed Pokemon, everything in that range, right? So Pokemon like Charizard or Urshifu, for example. So this Thundurus is an offensive set with Life Orb. You've got Grass Knot, Thunder, and Weather Ball. And Volt Absorb is always nice because, Regieleki is obviously one of the most common Pokemon in the format. With that, you can kind of ignore Aleki, as well as have a favorable matchup into things like Thundurus and Zapdos, for example. Weather Ball also is really fun. You can do some funky things with it, where if you go Thundurus plus Kyogre, you can even Dynamax Thundurus and Max Geyser from the Weather Ball. Grass Knot's just really powerful, especially into restricteds like Groudon and Kyogre, and Thunder is obviously just the best means of offense, and you can run it instead of Thunderbolt here, because, of course, you have Kyogre setting up the rain. You also have Shuka Berry on Incineroar here with Brick Break. Otherwise, the set is pretty standard, but the Brick Break, of course, mainly to activate the policy on Dialga. However, with dual Brick Breaks on this team, you'll also obviously have a decent matchup into Grimmsnarl with the Light Clay and dual screen sets that are, fairly common. So, yeah. I think Latias is the Pokemon where I haven't really, used it very much so far while trying out the team. I know Terence, the creator, when he was messaging me about the team, said it was a rather situational Pokemon as well. But it's certainly interesting, right? Against slower teams, for example, you maybe have the ability to actually just get a Tailwind up, and then as your opponent targets Latias, it can force it out into something like Dialga, right? And so, you have to be a little bit careful about Latias, because with the eject button, if your opponent just attacks you before you even move, then you're just going to get forced out without really getting any value. But there's some funky plays that you could do with eject button, especially when you're up against maybe, slightly suboptimal matchups. And Mystical Fire is just a nice means of lowering your opponent's special attack. And of course, Ally Switch, high variance move that can always catch your opponents off guard. So, yeah. In my experience, like I said, I think Tornadus Dialga, Instant Dialga are the most consistent leads, but there's certainly other ways that you could play with the team as well. And yeah, I think it's just really neat. So question of the day, I want to know how you'd rate all the Gen 4 legendaries out of 10 down in the comment section below. I personally love Dialga. It's one of my favorite restricted, so I can't wait to try it out. I personally would give it like a 8 or a 9 out of 10. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and let's get started. Alright, first game of the day, and we're actually up against Xerneas and Groudon with Incineroar, Rillaboom, Amoonguss, and Zapdos. Dialga and Kyogre should have a really good matchup into this, in my opinion, but it's still easier said than done. Especially with Assault Vest Kyogre. I mean, the main thing is obviously denying the Geomancy from my opponent if we can. Tornadus is Taunt here. I feel decent about the Tornadus and Dialga lead here, where we can maybe just Brick Break to activate Policy immediately. Kyogre in the back. Incin as the fourth makes some sense. It's not great into Xerneas, but neither is any of my other Pokemon. Now, even though Dialga has a good matchup into Xerneas, you have to consider that we don't have a single Fairy resistance on the team here, and so Xerneas can actually still cause me a ton of issues, right? Especially if it gets Geomancy off, because our special or our restricted Pokemon are both special attackers in this matchup as well. So yeah, it's not that easy, but the main thing is to like make sure Xerneas just doesn't get Geomancy up for free. They're gonna go with Rillaboom and the Xerneas. I'm okay with that. You know, I could even consider Trick Rooming here. Like, if you're my opponent, you would probably just Fake Out into the Tornadus, right? Xerneas could just Geomancy. You'd still be eating up his Steel Spike, though, so I don't know if that's really worth it for my opponent. But, like, what can they even switch out into right now? Okay, it's Grassy Seed. That's not really viable. Or, not viable. Not good into what we have here. It is very viable as an item. They do have Incineroar as a potential switch-in. The play I expect my opponent to make is Fake Out into Tornadus and then Geomancy with Xerneas. The play I want to make is switch into Incineroar, Trick Room with Dialga, then self-Brick Break into Max Steel Spike. But they could Fake Out Dialga. I don't think they will, though, because Dialga maxing here seems so obvious that I'm down to go for the Trick Room play. And if they actually Fake Out Dialga, like, kudos to them. I guess they're just not worried about Taunt from Tornadus. But, like, the obvious play for me to make here, which would also be in a 5 play, would be to max the Dialga and just Steel Spike Xerneas, in my opinion. For that reason, though, I could see Xerneas protecting and then switching out, or going out into Incineroar here. Yep. Okay, so let's see what Rillaboom opts for. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Swords Dance. I did get an Intimidate onto it, though, so it's only at +1. Not really that scary. I'm mainly curious how fast it is relative to our Dialga here. Because, like, we have a decent amount of speed investment, so good chance it just outpaces us. Which means you could Dynamax, then max Quake into Dialga. That would be pretty cool. So one play I can make here is go for the self-Brick Break, activate the Weakness Policy, just max Steel Spike into Xerneas. I'm not totally opposed to that here. Then I could Parting Shot the next turn. Yeah, I'm down for it. I don't think Rillaboom scares me that much here. But I guess, like, do I really need to target Xerneas down aggressively here? Maybe not, honestly. We do to max first, though, so that's already a compelling sign. Because if Rillaboom's not maxing here, I think I'm not scared at all. You're only at +1 attack. You have a defense boost. That doesn't really matter. And honestly, part of the reason I made that turn 1 play is because I just really wanted to feature this Dialga set, because I think it's super cool with the policy stuff. Okay, so they don't max. They don't switch. Works for me. Brick Break here will activate Dialga's Weakness Policy. Kind of overkill, honestly, on this turn. Like, I could have, of course, just clicked Fake Out onto one Pokemon, and it's actually high horsepower into Rillaboom, okay. Or high horsepower from Rillaboom into Incin, but I think this will set them back a decent amount. Although I see what they were going for here, because the idea is you get rid of Shuka Berry, so then the, because they're going to play towards maxing Groudon at this point, I think. So it's like this turn I could have clicked Fake Out into Xerneas and then max into Rillaboom, but I was expecting Rillaboom to max here, and I really wanted to get the policy off, because the Dialga with policy will just one-shot anything that's not Dynamaxed right now. The awkward thing is that Groudon might underspeed us under Trick Room. But all things considered, I think that's a great turn for us. And it's been a great start, right? Xerneas was one of the things I was really worried about, like, it getting boosted up, and then if you get to the point where you stall out my Dynamax... Ooh, okay, Amoonguss is in the back, though, so this is going to cause me some problems. Amoonguss means that you can obviously Spore into Dialga. So the play I want to make is to switch Incin out into Tornadus and Protect here, so then I can just Taunt next turn. The downside here is that they end up just clicking Spore into the Incineroar slot instead. The other play to make is to actually just say, you know what? I don't care if you put me to sleep this turn. I'll just burn a turn to sleep immediately. I could also Parting Shot in this position. It's a fairly obvious play for me to make. I wonder if there was a slightly better play. Like, Parting Shot there could be worth it, because then it's like... Yeah, Parting Shot is just... Well, the thing is, if I get hit by Spore there... if Spore goes into that slot, I wouldn't be in great shape anyway, right? But okay, they do Spore into Dialga, so that's good. And high horsepower. Perfect. That turn was, like, I don't know, just a little bit risky, because if Spore actually, like, they made the read and ignored Dialga, which would be a tough play to make, but if they went for it, I would not be in great shape. But now I can just Taunt into the Amoonguss and go for a Steel Spike onto the Rillaboom. And I want to eliminate Rillaboom here because Kyogre is presumably my... Or, sorry, Groudon's presumably my opponent's last Pokemon. Okay, Amoonguss protects. That's fine by me. I'm going to go for Glide, but that doesn't really do too much here. I mean, it does a lot of damage, but it doesn't stop the taunt from coming out next turn, right? Because now what I can do is Steel Spike should eliminate the Rillaboom. Kyogre is now set up against Groudon in the endgame. I have Incineroar as a switch in for an Intimidate as well. Trick Room's expiring as well. So this is the beauty of Policy Dialga, right? It gets the boost, and we're just picking up all these knockouts. Okay. The only downside is because they had Amoonguss, I had to protect here. And I wasn't sure they'd really bring Amoonguss into this matchup, but it makes a lot of sense because it's obviously pretty solid into both Kyogre and Dialga. So, Groudon's my opponent's last Pokemon now. We are at +2 defense with Dialga, and there's the Incineroar in the back, right? So even though we're no longer Dynamaxed here, I might still be able to take a Max Quake. Just double check the field state. Last turn of Trick Room here. We've got Amoonguss here. Amoonguss just protected. The thing is, I don't know if you have Mentor or not, but I feel like if you wouldn't have Mentor because otherwise, why would you protect last turn, right? Why not just attack? But I think it's objectively better to protect Dialga here. If I knock out Amoonguss, I win, though. So, like, the play I want to make here is, I know I'm at +2 defense, should be able to survive a Max Quake from Groudon. I want to just taunt the Amoonguss and click Roar of Time into it. Because Kyogre is going to win against Groudon in the endgame. So Groudon should Dynamax here. That's fine. I also don't know how fast Groudon is here, right? Like, if you actually have speed investment onto it, maybe the Dialga is just faster. I'm just, like, making an educated guess that it's not Mentor about Amoonguss here, because if you were Mentor, I think you would have been comfortable just clicking Spore last turn. I don't see why you wouldn't do that, personally. And if it was the Long Kong, then so be it. But Mentor's not exactly the most common item on Amoonguss. So let's see. If there's no Mentor here, we should be good. Nice. Oh, I said we should be good. We're actually faster with Dialga, which is perfect as well. But we could have missed Roar of Time there. But I don't think missing there actually would have been too bad. Although they actually are Focus Sash. Okay. That makes sense. It's a decently common item, but it's fine. A Brick Break will just KO it next turn from the Tornadus. And yeah, you can see now we survived that with Dialga. So Groudon will be able to get a couple of special defense boosts, right? But that's fine. You have to essentially give up the Amoonguss here because it's taunted, so I have a free knockout onto it. I guess the question is, does Brick Break actually KO it? It's, you know, obviously at 1 HP plus the amount that you get from grassy terrain. Even if it doesn't, it's fine. I'm just waiting to stall out Groudon's Max Spring and Kyogre, click Water Spout, and the game's just over from there. I'm not going to risk a Hurricane Miss here. Yeah, Brick Break does enough. It's, like, obviously just such low HP, but there's one of those scenarios where it's like, maybe there's a chance it survives. That'd be kind of funny. So Groudon goes for another Max Quake there. That's fine. Dialga's going to faint. No problem. But without any attack boost on Groudon, I don't really care about it here too much. Honestly, though, Dialga Kyogre is one of the better restricted duos I could have had going into Groudon and Xerneas, and so that gave me a decent advantage in this one. So let's go out into Incineroar now. They'll probably just go for a third Max Quake, that's fine. Even at +3 Special Defense and Assault Vest, like, I'll have Tailwind up with Tornadus, and then, you know, Tornadus and Kyogre looks pretty solid in this endgame. Especially with Intimidate here. The one thing I don't want to do right now is actually click Parting Shot. It's tempting, right? But like I could Parting Shot, bring in Kyogre, and then get crit by Max Quake. So that's like one of the only ways to actually throw the game from this position. So here, let's just Tailwind, ensure that our Kyogre will be faster than the Groudon, and instead of going for a Parting Shot, we can actually just go for Flare Blitz for some free damage. Also gives us, obviously, the opportunity to go for a Burn. This is just setting us up for the end game. And then after this, like, I can bring in Kyogre, I can taunt the Groudon to prevent it from going for Sword Stances. Blitz actually does a very nice amount of damage there. And they're going to go for a third Max Quake, but that's fine, right? I was always okay with this endgame scenario. Part of the thing that made this a little bit trickier was the Amoonguss carrying the Focus Sash. Although at that point, since we already got into Taunt off onto it, it was honestly fine. The other thing to consider was launching Roar of Time into the Groudon slot instead. That actually could have worked out well as well. But I was like, in my head, if I could, you know, have a 4v1 or a 3v1 advantage where my opponent's only down to Groudon, I'm in a pretty good spot, right? So Groudon's intimidated now. Even if you crit press with Blades, this Kyogre is pretty bulky. I'm not sure it actually gets the knockout, so... Single Water Spout might not get the knockout, but 2 certainly will. And we got Tailwind up as well. I could go for Taunt here. But I think it's better to just Hurricane. The only thing we'd be taunting is a Swords Dance, but 2 Water Spouts should KO Groudon anyway, so I don't think I actually have to care about Swords Dance. And then Hurricane just gives me potential to get a Confusion as well. That does really look like Assault Vest to me, given how well it took the Hurricane. So, yep, you do see the Groudon survive there, but that's fine. And it's going to be Precipice Blades, but like I said, even if you were to crit Kyogre here, I'm probably fine. And no crit. Cool. It did feel a little bit scary. I'm actually curious if Brick Break gets the knockout here, so done a Brick Break here. It did feel scary in the sense that, like, you know, we had this huge lead, and it felt like the game was essentially locked up after Rillaboom didn't max when we had Trick Room up, but... You know, Groudon can always still be a scary Pokemon, but the downside of the Assault Vest set is that you can't really boost your attack, so even a single attack drop really puts you in a tough spot. The main tricky thing, I think, in this game was not knowing Amoonguss' item, and then that one turn where I switched in Tornadus for taunt pressure, like, my opponent could have actually spored the Tornadus as it switched in, and that actually would have put me in a really tricky position. I think we still would have been able to potentially win from that angle, but then I'd have to get maybe a little bit lucky with my sleep turns, whereas, like, if I just eat up 3 turns of sleep with both Dialga and Tornadus, it could be really bad. So, yeah, that was a really fun way to get this started with this team, so let's keep things going. Okay. First of all, this next team is an opposing Dialga team. Didn't expect to see that. I do not know what our Dialga matchup is. We don't have a ground type or a fighting type attack here. We might be in a little bit of trouble. Also, there's the Corsola, whichever one it is, which we used in the very beginning of Sword and Shield, but I'm going to be honest, I just don't remember what this Pokemon does, like in the slightest. So, I'm down to get wrecked. I don't even know how we deal with the opposing Dialga. The best bet actually would be to activate Policy and then max Wormwind it 2 times for a KO, I think. Feels like the most reasonable line to take here. Tornadus doesn't have speed control outside of Tailwind. Like, we don't have an Icy Wind or a Scary Face or a Cotton Spore. So, like, there's a decent chance we just match Tailwind in this game. That's not really great. So I could go the Trick Room route instead. That's actually kind of interesting to me. Like, just lead Incineroar plus Dialga. Kyogre. I don't even know if Thundurus really provides much value here. I'm bringing Tornadus because I think Hurricane's actually decent damage into a couple of the Mons, and then, like, it gives me taunt, pressure. I could even, like, I don't necessarily have to go Trick Room, right? Like, I could Tailwind. Turn 1, like, protect Dialga, Parting Shot, then bring out Tornadus, then turn 2 Tailwind. That'll allow me to stagger my Tailwind as well. But we have options. It is just going to be Whimsicott and Dialga. Okay. The problem here is if you have Helping Hand on Whimsicott, you could just Helping Hand max Quake Dialga on turn 1. Their pressure goes off first, so it's not looking good for our friendly Dialga here. The other play I could make right now is, like, switch Dialga out into Tornadus, expecting a max Quake, and then Parting Shot into their Dialga. I don't necessarily, like, basically, if I fake out Dialga, Whimsicott, their Life Orb, Max Quake with Helping Hand on Whimsicott, which is decently common with Whimsicott Dialga pairings, or really any Prankster user, my Dialga's just in a ton of trouble here. So I am willing to just take a slight risk here in Parting Shot and switch out into Tornadus. If it doesn't work out, so be it, but we're already not going to have an easy time in this matchup, right? For my opponent's end, it makes more sense to actually just click a Dragon-type attack because I don't have a single Dragon-type immunity or resistance. But even if they were to Dragon-type attack Tornadus, we have Focus Sash, so I could survive. If they target Incineroar here, though, I am probably just done for. But, yeah, there's so many different leads that they could go with here, honestly. And this is one of the downsides of not having, like, incredible coverage with the Dialga. And that's why Dialga really loves running 4 offensive attacks, right? But the Trick Room and the Protector are really essential to this moveset, so. Okay, Whimsicott opts for Protect, so probably doesn't have Helping Hand, or maybe it's Eject Button, and they do Quake into Tornadus. Okay, beautiful. This is like the perfect example of how you can maybe win or at least have an advantageous start even when it's like not necessarily the best matchup. So I'm very happy about that, obviously. Let's think about their team for a second. Whimsicott, Zacian. Really curious of the Corsola, whatever it is. I always mix up the base form and then like the evolution that it got. I think that's just Galarian Corsola. You can see, obviously, I'm not very familiar playing against it, but we did feature it, I think, in the beginning of Sword and Shield. Anyway, we got the Parting Shot off here, and they didn't get the Quake off either. So now I can go into Dialga, because you'll actually probably activate my policy for me. You know, the thing is, I actually want to go into Kyogre here, because my goal is to stall out their Dialga's Dynamax, and with Kyogre and Assault Vest, I can do that a little bit better. My other fear is that Whimsicott is Eject Button here. And if, let's say, like, I bring out Dialga, I max it, and they just switcheroo me, it's still pretty bad, right? Whereas here, well, you're at -1 now, so it's not as scary. I'm down to just Ice Beam, Whimsicott, and Hurricane it here, honestly. I guess my opponent could Tailwind and then max, like, Tailwind and then max Hailstorm into Tornadus is a concern of mine. Down to Ice Beam into Whimsicott. I could Tailwind myself, but like there's a chance their Whimsicott actually has Trick Room. Would you really Trick Room right now, though? I guess is my question. Yeah, they don't. Okay, they just go for Taunt. That's fine. The thing is, by going for Ice Beam here, if you're, you know, Focus Sash and you do with Indeed go with a Hailstorm with Dialga. Ooh, okay, it's actually bulky though. But they just offer Wormwind. Okay, I'll take that trade. Nice, and we don't even take half our health there. Beautiful. Although now the problem is my opponent can get a Tailwind up with their Whimsicott, but I think I'm okay with that in the grand scheme of things because we already stalled out 2 turns of my opponent's Dynamax, which is so important here. Instead of an Ice Beam, I can go for a Scald. The reason to Scald here is because it would cover for a switch-in. Man, Tornadus really doesn't do anything, though. I don't really care if they get Tailwind up, though, is the thing. So, I'm down to actually just click Hurricane here. I could switch Tornadus out into Incineroar, but I think Incineroar is really valuable to conserve right now, given its matchup into Zacian in the back. And if I'm switching out Tornadus, it's solely to switch it out and then bring it back in for a Tailwind. Don't really find that useful. But, of course, now seeing how this last turn played out, I would have preferred to have just KO'd Whimsicott. So it is going to be Hailstorm this time around onto Tornadus. I assume that will KO us with the Sash. Yep. But that's fine. I mean, I could have switched Torn out into Dialga there, or sorry, into Incin like I mentioned, but let's say they Wormwind that slot. I don't think that's super good for me. And I'm fine playing the slower game right now because I've stalled out my opponent's Dynamax completely. So here's what we can do now, right? I have the Dialga on my end. Hurricane connects, which is a little bit of free damage. I have the Dialga on my end, so I can bring in Dialga, Dynamax the Dialga, switch Kyogre out into Incineroar to get it Intimidate on Zacian. They'll most likely activate my Weakness Policy, and then I can get a one-hit knockout onto their Zacian with Max Steel Spike. Or I could Wormwind into the Dialga slot. That's the other consideration right now. I do think Dialga's correct to go into here. If it's Incineroar, it's a little bit too passive from my end. Because they're going to bring out Zacian, yeah. Oh, no, they don't. They bring out Zapdos. Okay, I'm a little bit concerned that has Eerie Impulse right now, so I'm not sure I want to pull the trigger immediately with Dialga, but this is where I could just click Trick Room and Ice Beam, I think, reasonably effectively. Because they just set up Tailwind, and I didn't get Tailwind up, so now I can go for Trick Room. So, yeah, I'm willing to Ice Beam here and just click Trick Room. I think Zapdos is actually not that scary here. And the reason I don't want to Dynamax with Dialga here is because I want to cover for Eerie Impulse Zapdos. And it feels really bad to Dynamax a special attacker and then get hit by an Eerie Impulse. And one of the most common Zapdos sets right now is Safety Goggles with Eerie Impulse, Roost, Thunderbolt, and Hurricane. So, given that that's the decently meta attack, like, we just want to make sure we don't fall victim to it. Plus, Dialga's at -1 special attack right now, and their damage output into my Dialga is actually really, really lacking. So, yep, there's Eerie Impulse. That is fine with me, though, because now I'll get Trick Room up, and I did not Dynamax Dialga, so... They're going to Earth Power Kyogre. Okay, interesting. I guess expecting maybe an instant switch, or, like... Well, actually, it makes a ton of sense, because normally with Dialga, you run, like, Roar of Time, right? You don't really want to go for that right now. Yeah, this just puts us in a game-winning spot, I think, even though we're at -2 with my Dialga. I can just switch it out into Incineroar easily. And Dialga should sweep through my opponent's team at this point in the game. Especially because we know my Dialga's faster than my opponent's under Trick Room. Which is a pretty big deal. I could just max Dialga here, but I'm fine clicking Ice Beam and then switching Dialga out into Incineroar. Because Incin plus Dialga should just win this endgame for us, even without Policy activated. So, I'm really happy about how turn 1 played out, right? Like, when you look at a matchup like this, if my opponent makes, like, you know, their best play, I'm gonna lose the game most of the time, right? Like, imagine if they had max Hailstorm my Dialga on turn 1 and catch Tornadus on the switch-in. It's really hard to come back from that. But just wasting a single turn of Dynamax can give us a huge advantage, and because we don't really have great ways to damage their Dialga, we had to stall out their Dynamax first, basically. No Protect from Zapdos, which I'm very surprised to see, but honestly, that's great. I thought their play was Protect Zapdos, maybe try to KO Kyogre, but yeah, now we're in great shape. And Dialga is going to commit the Roar of Time, which is fine by me. You KO Kyogre, I bring in Dialga now. I just max Dialga, Brick Break, max Steel Spike, game over. I guess there's a chance Zacian is in their last Pokemon. Hold on, I didn't think about that. That would be very interesting. But I haven't even Dynamaxed in this game yet, so I think I'd be okay even if it was not Zacian. But it is. Okay, cool. I don't even need to go for the Brick Break play, to be honest. Yeah, the more consistent play to make here is to always just fake out Zacian, Dynamax Dialga, Wormwind into their Dialga to get the KO, fake out into their Zacian, and then next turn I can go for the Brick Break into Wormwind play. It's like, why not take the free fake out when you have it, right? But this game's over. There's no way my opponent can win at this point unless I have my Wi-Fi disconnected. Or I guess I timed out and, like, it protected each turn. But, yeah. This was a really interesting matchup. I mean, Dialga's not exactly the most common Pokemon in the format. It's just really tough, right? But one of the things I like about this Dialga is that I feel like up until now, almost all the Dialgas that players have used have generally revolved around, like, Life Orb and 3 to 4 attacks, maybe Protect over one of the attacks, right? But the thing about this Dialga is it actually is a really potent Trick Room user, and so you have 3 means of speed control with this team. Double Tailwind from Tornadus and Latias, as well as Trick Room from Dialga, right? And the reason you can get away with only running 2 offensive attacks and your main 2 typings in Steel and Dragon is because you have the Weakness Policy, right? The goal of Dialga is often to just pick up one-hit knockouts with that Life Orb variant, but you can essentially do the same thing when you have Policy because there are very few Pokemon that can reliably take a +2 Steel Spike or a +2 Wormwind, for example. Cool. Tailwind peters out. Doesn't really matter. Trick Room is still up. How many turns are there left? Still 2. So their play would be to go for a double Protect. I'm going to go for Steel Spike then, and then Self Brick Break. +2 Steel Spike should be a KO, especially with Hail ticking down right now as well. And the reason I'm willing to go for this, I mean, it should just be a KO. But what it would cover for is my opponent's Zacian going for like protect multiple times, right? Because their win con is really going for a double protect. And so by going for the Steel Spike, you get an increase in defense with both Pokemon, which is really valuable. So, yep, that gets the knockout cleanly. And I was like, even if you're really bulky Zacian, then like you're not even going to come close to knocking out Dialga, even with like a close combat, for example. So, yeah. Ultimately, you know, it's funny seeing the Dialga battles here. I mean, we've got up against some very unconventional restricted pair. Not very unconventional, but I guess ones that are not really used that much. Xerneas, Groudon, Dialga, Zacian so far. But, yeah, really happy to feature the policy set here. And I think the Trick Room has been incredibly effective so far. So let's look for a third. Third game here, and it's a little bit more standard of a restricted pairing and Groudon and Zacian. This one is Charizard, Venusaur, and Thundurus, which is pretty interesting because all of those are like really good max options, but considerably weaker outside of Dynamax, although Venusaur is just Venusaur, and good outside of Dynamax because of Sleep Powder. And then Indeedee Male is the last one, meaning Trick Room Imprison is definitely on the table here from it. I wonder if Latias can do anything here. Like, it's got the Mystical Fire, which is really cool, but I think I kind of prefer the priority Tailwind from Tornadus still. Thunderous T is also somewhat interesting here because I can Grass Knot Groudon, Thunderbolt into Charizard, and Weather Ball. I think the main thing in this one is figuring out who I want to drop because I think all of our Mons are decent as options. Indeedee also can Fake Out, right? So I have to be careful about that. The problem with Latias is like it still just takes a lot of damage from Behemoth Blade. And I can't necessarily guarantee a Tailwind up with it. It is interesting though. Like Mystical Fire and Sun actually does really good damage here too, is the thing. But I think Tornadus is still the safer route to guarantee Tailwind. So I'm willing to go for Tornadus, Dialga, Kyogre, and then Thundurus T is the last one. I think Thundurus T is just really cool here because of Weather Ball. Like, we could take advantage of my opponent's Sun, right? Like, let's say I Tailwind, then I can Weather Ball in the Sun against Venusaur. I can bring out Kyogre, set up the Rain, Weather Ball into Groudon, Weather Ball in Sun against Zacian. So, we have options. It could even be a Dynamax option, although I think that'll most likely not be the case. Thundurus and Charizard makes me think that it's going to be Eerie Impulse from Thundurus. But it could be the Prankster variant still. Sorry, the Defiant variant, which is pretty scary, honestly. I'm down to Tailwind. I think I'm okay going for a Tailwind and a Protect on the first turn. Scout out for the Thundurus set. You could just Eerie Impulse Dialga, Max Charizard, then Wildfire into the Tornadus slot. Yeah, it is Charizard maxing. So we'll see. I wanted to guarantee Tailwind up because now it's like I get a free switch in if you KO Tornadus, but it being defensive Thundurus felt more likely here, so I could have just taunted Thundurus, max Dialga immediately. I'm sure it's Eerie Impulse going into the Dialga slot too is the problem for me. Yeah. Maybe you get Thunder Wave as well, but Eerie Impulse is just better. Okay, they go for Airstream, which I'm actually totally okay with because, like, yeah, you get a speed boost, but now I can taunt your Thundurus to prevent it from Eerie Impulsing. Okay, so let's go for Taunt. They'll probably Wildfire Dialga now. Taunt max. And just Wormwind here into Charizard, I think. Because then I can bring out Thundurus T to replace my... Oh, okay, they switched their Thundurus out. Into Groudon. Good play. You know what the thing is, though? If you indeed have Groudon Charizard... I mean, they're going for Wildfire here. I actually could have gone for Brick Break plus Wormwind to just KO Charizard. And the reason why that's better is because the Brick Break would cover for the Eerie Impulse there anyway. Right? So it's like... I guess the problem is I'm not KOing Thundurus. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really regret making this play. My opponent just made a better play. Groudon being taunted is a big deal, actually, though, because it means it can't protect, right? Meaning that I can freely target that slot next turn. Oh, they're also just faster than us. That is no bueno. Yeah, that's very bad news. This is the slight downside of when you run a Pokemon like without much speed investment, because then even under Tailwind, it can still be slower. That was so much damage on a Charizard. What? Okay. But it's fine, right? Because you give me a free switch it into Kyogre now, because you went for Wildfire. Yeah, it's not bad. We will bring out Kyogre. Groudon is going to be forced to sacrifice itself or switch out. Dialga's burning up in the flames right now. We can bring out Kyogre. Yeah, because they were faster anyway, I guess even if I went for the Brick Break play, I mean, I'd have a +2 Dialga at this point, which would be a little bit stronger, but I thought it was decent and likely Thundurus would stay in there. I don't think that's a terrible prediction. I mean, we expect Zacian as their last one, right? The problem is actually... Oh, I might have actually needed to bring out Thundurus first, because this Kyogre is also not exactly speedy. 139, though, so... We should be faster than Charizard, yeah. Charizard's going to Max Guard here, and you would expect Groudon to maybe switch out or just sack itself here. So we'll go for Water Spout. I actually want to get like a defense boost here if I can, but it's not going to happen, I don't think. Water Spout and Steel Spike into Groudon, super safe though. Yep, there's Max Guard. Groudon's going to sacrifice itself, no surprise. So my Thundurus T is going to be really interesting in this end game. The reason why it's really interesting is because it matches up very well into both Charizard and their Thundurus. But the thing is, they should just bring out Zacian from their end now. And unfortunately, Wildfire, super good into Kyogre right now. Reducing our damage output from Water Spout as well. So now you can either bring out Thundurus or your Zacian. It's going to be Thundurus, okay. Keep in mind, Thundurus can click Thunder Wave here as well onto the Kyogre slot. Ooh, that actually might pose some problems for me. Last one or Tailwind. If you T-Wave me... I mean, Charizard's not really going to do anything damage-wise, though. How many turns of Wildfire left? 2 still. Last turn of Tailwind. I've got Thundurus in the back. I mean, I want to just go for the knockouts in front of me right now, right? Like, I don't care about a Thunder Wave. Charizard's not really going to do damage to me, so just Water Spout and then just Wormwind. Steel Spike on a Thundurus may be better. There's this small chance they switch out, but they actually Eerie Impulse Dialga. Okay, perfect. This should be a double knockout, right? Beautiful. If Thundurus is Citrus here, maybe you actually survive. There's no way, yeah. Water Spout itself almost just KO'd. Steel Spike would cover for a Zacian switch him. Yeah, Thundurus was buried here, and so with the Eerie Impulse, I wasn't sure if a Steel Spike would KO, and I need to guarantee the knockout onto Thundurus right now, in my opinion. Okay, good. Still isn't over, though, right? Like, it's a 3v1 against Zacian, but Zacian could pull off the 3v1 for sure. However, I think the advantage for us is that I have a super powerful Scald from Kyogre and Trick Room Pressure with Dialga right now, so the combination of those is really good. Oh, I guess the problem, though, is that Dialga might faint from this last tick of Wildfire. Ugh. Yeah, that's not good. I wonder if they care about the Trick Room here, though, is the thing. Do faint from Wildfire, I think, right? I gotta double check the math. 34 on 207. 180. Yeah, I faint, right? Ooh, that makes this kind of interesting. Because the question for my opponent's angle right now is, like, you could play rough Kyogre. Dialga would get a Trick Room up, but then it's a 1v1 here. Kyogre, however, will, you know, really destroy Zacian. Will it actually? I mean, Scald and Zacian certainly stronger. I don't even know if they have play rough. Okay, I'm going to switch into Thundurus here. And Trick Room. I might have been better off just attacking with both, but, like, you know, if they play rough Kyogre, get a one-hit knockout onto that, I Trick Room, and then I faint from Wildfire, that's bad. Yep, it is play rough into Thundurus. Okay. So the idea was to get Trick Room up and then have Kyogre in the end game rather than Thundurus. But it might still not be enough, to be honest. Yeah, unfortunately, I think Dialga just faints from Wildfire. If we had, like, just a little bit more HP here, we would have been basically guaranteed the win. I mean, the question is, with Kyogre, there's two options right now. Do I think a single target Water Spout's going to KO from the range that they're at? If not, I could Scald and fish for a burn instead. The burn is like, I have a burn or a crit here to win me the game with this. With Water Spout, I just don't know the calc single target against them. I'm not very confident on it KOing, to be honest, so I think I'm going to go for the Scald, especially because I don't know how much bulk the Zacian has here. Yeah, they protect. That's always correct. Okay, that's fine. There's still one more turn of Rain. We don't have Origin Pulse here. If we had an Origin Pulse, actually, we would have won, assuming we connect on it. Unless Zacian is, like, omega bulky. Go for another Scald. Okay, we're looking for a burn or a crit here. Oh, that was bulky enough, definitely, to take the Water Spout. Or a play rough miss, but unfortunately, none of the three happened. Okay. I'm okay with that endgame, though. Scald was the correct play there, and, yeah, Zacian was incredibly bulky there. So, Origin Pulse might not have actually been able to save us either. It was one of those, I think this game highlights the value of Wildfire, because my opponent got so much value out of it, right? Like, Kyogre was just getting chipped away at it. It actually knocked out Dialga post Dynamax as well. Even though it was a 3v1 against Zacian, it was still really difficult to win, right? Because let's say I stay in with Kyogre there, you know, they play rough me, get a KO onto it. Yeah, I can get a Flash Cannon onto the Zacian. I wonder if Dialga switching out was ever correct, so then it's Dialga plus Thundurus. And then basically, that might have been the actual way to win this game, but this endgame also seemed doable, where if we get the burn there, then the thing is, they actually took the Scald so well, I don't think another Scald would have even KO'd, to be honest. Yeah, so their bulk really came up huge here for them. So then I could have considered max Steel Spiking with Dialga, but it wouldn't have KO'd the Thundurus with Citrus, I don't think. One of the main downsides here. And then, like, I think because I didn't go for the... I could have self-activated the policy. Although if I activated the policy, my Dialga would have had less HP as well. Part of the issue here, I think, was Dialga being slower than my opponent after just a single max Airstream, which wasn't super good. But the game was really close. Wonder if I could have leveraged my other Pokemon a little bit better here. Because Thundurus in the end was actually useless, right? Like, if I just had Incineroar in the back, then we would easily have won against Zacian. So, I guess, Pokemon-wise, that'd be the first adjustment I'd want to make. But Thundurus looked really good in Team Preview there, given its matchup against both Charizard and Groudon. We just so happened to knock out both of those first rather than the Zacian. So, my opponent did a great job conserving their Zacian, to their credit. So, yeah. Anyway, though, I had a lot of fun bringing the Dialga out in all of the games today, so hopefully it's opened your eyes to how the Weakness Policy Dialga set can be used. Hopefully we can leverage, you know, some of the other Pokemon like Latias and Thundurus a little bit more in the next episode and the next few games. But thank you so much as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all soon. All right, peace.